welcome to the West Tigers podcast. This is episode number 296. Eddie joined by Steve and Gary. Happy New Year to you both, boys. Gary, it seems a bit of a regular occurrence now. No Declan, no Joel. What's going on?
I think Joel's on holiday somewhere. He seems to be away all the time at the moment. I've given you a hard time for a long time about not being here, Eddie, but all the big news starts to drop, and Joel and Declan are nowhere to be seen.
No, you might be on the same ship that Pasco and Lee are on out of town, Steve, at the moment. I mean, it's good to put 2023 in the rearview mirror as a Tigers fan, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, Eddie. It was a rough year, but it had a nice finish to it, and all's looking good for 24. But I can tell you, I do know where Declan is, and I know that Declan is locked in a room somewhere, and he's writing a list, thinking up all the reasons that Jerome Luai won't come to the West Tigers over the next 12 months. So I know he's hard at work with that.
Yeah, every time that Jerome Luai looks in the wrong direction, Declan's going to have a little bit of a heart palpitation, and the worry will seep back in.
Yeah, another 12 months of sleepless nights for Declan, boys. I'm not massive on New Year's resolutions, but I thought I'd ask you guys for one, whether it be from a club's perspective or a personal one as a fan. Steve, what do you got for me?
Yeah, well, mine's a mix of both. It's personal and it's West Tigers related. So, and obviously this is not a resolution that I achieve on my own, but one thing I'm really keen to do is re-engage with the club in regards to the ambush and the podcast, and try to get that relationship happening again. So that's something I'm hopeful about anyway.
Gary?
Yeah, mine's for the fan base as a whole a little bit, especially Steve. I think there needs to be a little bit of patience. I think we've made some big changes at our club. There's been a big signing announced yesterday, but I still think there's a little bit of roughness in the waters ahead. I think it's still going to be at times a difficult year, and I think the fan base just needs to be a little bit patient, Steve, to deal with that.
So you're giving an excuse rather than a resolution, mate. Is that right?
Look, I'm not going for an excuse. It's a resolution to give the club time to sort it out. And listen to Richardson today. I think there's a couple of slight digs at previous administration about some of the things that might be happening or had been happening at the club behind the scenes.
Yeah, mine was to renew my membership. I did have a membership last year, but I'll be honest, it was almost like a birthday gift from a mate who paid for it. I don't know if I would have last year, considering sort of just where I was at in terms of how many games I go to and just the feeling of hopelessness around the club. But seems a lot of members are sort of re-engaging, like Steve said, and looking forward to this year at least. Easy to at this point on the 4th of January. But Steve, it was announced on Wednesday that Jerome Luai has signed a 5-year deal worth $6 million to join the club. He'll be joining in 2025. Before I go through the ins and outs of that, what did you make of a player holding their own press conference in Darling Harbour, standing next to his dad and his manager?
Yeah, well, as you know, Eddie, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist. I like
dinosaur. Is that the word?
It's not the word that I would have used. No, traditionalist more. But I like to see sporting stars be a little bit humble. So it's really not my go, but good luck to the bloke. He's young and he's vibrant and he stands by it, and if you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, and he's doing that so far. So good luck to him.
The one thing it does for me, and I do tend to agree with Steve, I'm someone who likes to see the clubs make these announcements, but I think the one thing holding that press conference does is it puts an end to the circus that was starting to develop before Christmas. You had cameras outside training, the Panthers training at the end of last year, trying to ask him questions, trying to get answers from him about what he was going to decide to do. I think if this had just been announced with a typical press release, I think there would have been cameras outside training at Penrith today. There would have been media constantly asking him questions about his future. And I think what yesterday was from Jerome Luai was an attempt to put all that behind him, to put that to bed, to be able to put a line in the sand and say, I've answered these questions already. You had a chance to ask all these questions. I'm now focusing on the rest of my time at Penrith. And I think especially for Penrith and probably for Jerome as well, that's probably not a bad idea and not a bad situation to be in. Though I did find it a little odd that the first we heard of it was coming from Jerome Luai at his own press conference. I think it may have been a little bit better look if the club made an announcement, say in the morning, and then Jerome held his press conference in the afternoon. I would have preferred to see that, but I can't really begrudge the guy. He's signed a huge contract. He's coming to the Wooden Spooners, and what it does do is he took ownership of that decision, and that's probably something we haven't really seen from a player coming to our club before. When you have guys like Api Coruscant, who was great for us last year, but when he signed and came across, he was making jokes at Penrith grand final celebrations about going to the Wooden Spooners. I think at least Jerome's put a pretty good foot forward yesterday to say why he's coming to the Tigers. And some of that is money, but yeah.
I didn't mind it so much. I think it's probably a rare thing to do at this point in Australian sport. But if you follow, boxing and the guys like Anthony Mundine and American sport, they're big on self-promotion and being confident. And I think it resonates with this younger generation who some of them are like that. And I think, if we're looking to re-engage a fan base, and particularly with young fans that haven't had any success the last 10 years, then he might be the face of this club, Steve.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Eddie, because we talked about this in the last year about how we were going to lose our young supporter base and we weren't going to have this great, these great numbers of Tigers fans around in the future if the club didn't do it. So to get a bloke like that, he is going to resonate with the younger supporter base, and that's a good thing. Can I just say one thing that I really find difficult to get excited about is this whole 12-month wait. Like it just doesn't sit well with me. Like we've just had this signing, we're excited about it, yet when they all run out in the field in a couple of months' time, he's not going to be there, and he's not there for another 12 months. I don't know what the answer is, but it's sort of like a false dawn.
But for me, what that 12 months does is it makes it harder for sides who are Wooden Spooners to rebuild, because really your class players that you need to sign, you've had to sign 12 months previous. So you can't, over the off-season, have a huge roster turnover, especially with high-quality players like Jerome. It really takes an extra 12 months to rebuild your squad because you go into a little bit of a holding pattern. And I think, though I think there's some things we can do with this year, but this year, because of this situation now, and Steve's not going to like it, but because of this situation where we're waiting for that marquee guy to come, I guess for a lot of people that the season's going to become a little bit of an afterthought, and people are already turning their eyes to 2025 because that's when we have this guy coming.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of just become a bit numb to it, Steve. I'm sort of with you there. It's sort of, but I mean, it's just happening more and more. And I remember last year, actually, once I sort of didn't lose interest in the Tigers, but lost all hope, I'd switch on Penrith and watch Api play for half an hour, and that was something to sort of look forward to. So it will be a long wait, but let's hope it's worth the wait. Gary, how happy should fans be? Let's talk about the actual deal itself. 5 years, $6 million. It's a lot of people would say perhaps he hasn't proven that to be that sort of marquee numbers. That'd be up in terms of, I reckon, the top 3 or 4 players in terms of monetary value in the game.
Yeah, I think there's an article today, or it might have been yesterday afternoon, stating that he was now in the top 3 players in the game pay-wise. And I think it is a little bit overs, but I think we're in a position where we do have to pay a little bit overs because we've won back-to-back Wooden Spoons. We haven't made the finals in a decade. So to get someone who is a 3-time premiership winning player, who has played State of Origin, three series in State of Origin, and has led and done this for the first time, led a second-tier international nation to a World Cup final, playing halfback, I think we do have to go a little bit over to get that sort of player. And it's hard to argue when you have a look at his CV that he's not a player up at that level. But the one thing he hasn't shown, and I'm hoping that the club is sure he can do this, is he hasn't shown that he can guide a side from halfback week to week in the NRL competition. And I think that's the only question mark that really sits there. And that's the one that he has to come out and prove. But the fan base should be very happy. This is a marquee signing. And for me, what it does is it shows that we're rebounding from that rock bottom that we're at. On the back of the structural changes that were made at the club in December, we've now turned around and continued that kind of trajectory up off the bottom of the barrel where we were with this signing. I think it just kind of adds to that narrative that this club has finally started to turn around, is now going in the right direction.
So it seems a little bit different maybe on the surface, Steve, than some of the other, I'm not sure if you'd call them big names, but big money signings we've made in the past. I mean, Josh Reynolds, really, Canterbury, I don't think gave him an offer. And at least with this one, it seemed to be a bit of a three-horse race. We know Canterbury were interested, and, you know, a lot of ex-Penrith coaches and players are at Canterbury. And Penrith, even though they didn't want to offer him the terms we did, they were in the race. So, I mean, this club's been known to lost races for Latrell Mitchell and Josh Addo-Carr, and to actually, you know, come out and win this one. I think it's whether it's good timing or whether it's just, you know, thank God we've got new management. It might be a little bit of both, but it's certainly a good start for them.
Yeah, well, a couple of things to that. I think it's absolutely, you know, because of new management. You know, I think our new management's got their fingerprints all over this. I think Benji Marshall does too. Like Jerome Luai's come out and said, he's got a lot of respect for Benji Marshall, so that's a good one. The Canterbury Bankstown comments surprised me a little bit. I thought that was all just a bit of media talk, but it sounds as if he was fairly seriously weighing up the Bulldogs, you know, at the 11th hour. So to then come over and snag him, like in the past, we'd have lost that, you know. He'd have gone to Canterbury and he'd have been yet another player that we almost signed. But in this case, that didn't happen. We got him. And that's got to be the new guys. And whether that's Benji or whether it's Richo, I don't know, whether it's a combination. But something has definitely changed because we got the guy we were after instead of missing him.
I have to admit, while watching that press conference live yesterday, I was waiting for another club's name to come out of his mouth. I thought, here we go. We're going to get to this point where everyone's all excited and then he's going to announce another club. I was so glad when that didn't happen.
It was just a little bit of relief when he did say West Tigers about, you know, 1 minute into that press conference. But it is a big win for Benji Marshall, Steve. Obviously doesn't have any wins next to his name yet, and he's got a hell of a job as a rookie coach coming off, you know, a team with two wooden spoons. But one of the, I suppose, positives when he was announced originally 12 months ago that he'd be the head coach, we thought for 25, but it turns out 24, is that he'd be able to potentially attract some players, some younger players that would resonate with him. And it seems like, listening to Luai, that he certainly has a connection there with Benji. Yeah,
well, that's right. And not just Luai. One of the things that I found interesting is a number of players have said, whether I've heard them in press conferences or whether through the media, through the press, but they've all sort of saying that they look up to Benji, they listen to him, they respect him. One of the things they have said a number of times is he doesn't just tell them what to do, he shows them what to do. He can still go out onto the football field and actually say, this is how I want you to play this play, right? And then he can still do it. And the players really relate to that, apparently. So, look, we haven't crossed the white line yet. There hasn't been a ball kicked. But everything he's had to do so far, he seems to be doing well. And that's all you can ask of him. So I think that's great.
And you compare it to the Dragons, Gary, and they seem to be in a boat that we were sort of 12 months ago.
Who's their coach again?
It's your mate, Shane Flanagan. And he's, you know, he's falling into that trap that unfortunately Lee used to do, is that, you know, tell the press who you're after and say, we expect an answer by next week. And then the next day you find out they've sort of re-signed with their own club. So it's something that I think's a positive, that at least there's other clubs out there who have not gone as bad as us that don't seem to be able to attract a player of this caliber.
Yeah, and we've been trying to attract the marquee players for a long time, and we've been swinging and missing for a long time. So it's really nice to get to a point where we've finally got one over the line. Most of the credit does need to go to Benji Marshall. I think the way Jerome spoke about him yesterday, the way he spoke about when he roomed with him in the Maori All-Star team, how much he looks up to him, how Benji convinced him of the style of play he wants him to play and how he wants Jerome to take control of the team. And I think all that was really crucial in getting him across the line. And that relationship was obviously crucial in getting him across the line. So I can't give any more credit to Benji. I didn't actually, I was starting to worry about that saying that you said earlier about him bringing players to the club and players wanting to come and play for him. There hadn't been a lot of evidence of that yet. And it's really pleasing to see him get a really big name over the line after years of trying. But I think a lot of credit needs to go to Shane Richardson as well. I think his fingerprints are all over this as well. It's really good to have a really smart operator across various parts of rugby league at our club. And I know we're going to talk about his interview a bit later, but he spoke about his relationship with Jerome as well. And I think that must have been a key component of getting him here as well.
Yeah, and just on that, Gary, one of the things that's really impressed me has been there was nothing out there about this. Right? It just happened, right? Like I know we were all wondering, and we all had our own ideas, and the press had their own ideas, but no one knew. Nothing came out of the club. There were no leaks, and that's an awesome change for us.
And all the information that had come out about it came from Penrith. The reason why he wasn't at training in those last couple of days is he was unhappy that Penrith had leaked that he was leaving the club to the media. He was unhappy that had happened, and that's why he was upset with the club. There's been numerous reports that he wasn't happy with the club. It was all because they leaked that he had told him he was leaving. And it's really nice that all those stories, and there wasn't a lot of stories about it over Christmas, but the stories that were there didn't come from us. And as far as we got in giving information was Richo in his first press conference saying how much he would like him to play for us. So it's a wonderful job, and it's a vast difference the way we've conducted this chase compared to others in the past.
Leaving Penrith, well, let's look ahead to 2025, Steve, with Jerome. Do you think he's the sort of personality that will potentially become that leader? He obviously wasn't asked to perhaps do that role, at least with the C next to his name at Penrith, but you listen to people speak to him and he say he's a born leader and he's always liked to be at the front of things. Do you think it's always been a bit of a risk, guys coming from, a winning culture like Penrith or Melbourne, and they turn up at the West Tigers and it's a bit of a shock. Do you think that his mentality will work for him or could work against him, or we just have to wait and see?
Yeah, well, I went on the pod at the end of last year and I said that concerned me, that I wasn't sure he was going to be that leader, but I'm going to say early on that I'm almost ready to take that back totally and say I was wrong. It's just listening to him and listening to everyone that knows him and has worked with him from a football perspective. They all say the same thing. They all say he's a great club man. They say he's a good leader, that he's a hard trainer, that he drives training. This is something we've talked about before. In particular, Gary has mentioned this about those guys that you bring to the club that drive the standards. And everyone who knows anything about this guy says he ticks all those boxes. So I'm going to pull right back from what I said before and say I think I was probably wrong in that assumption, and think that we probably have got the bloke we need. Now, the question for me still is whether he has the skill set to lead on the football field as a number 7. I didn't see the Samoa work that he did, so we'll just have to wait and see with that one.
For me, I agree with what Steve just said. All those comments about how he drives the culture and he drives the training. The key part of where I've heard that from is it's been coming from a lot of his teammates. It's been coming from the teammates at Penrith, and I put a fair bit more weight in that to someone in the media saying it or people hangers on around the club saying it. It's coming from the Penrith players, and when you have a look at the systems they have in place, you have a look at how they've developed their structures and the systems they play in football. If Jerome's driving that at training and driving that culture, then that's really crucial for our club, because I think Benji Marshall's in the process of trying to change that culture, and we've got guys like Api Coruscant and Clemmer driving that in the club, but getting someone who the premiers regard as driving their training and their culture to our club, I think can only be a benefit. And we have far too many players at the moment, and some of them are leaders in our club who do the opposite. When you have a guy who's going to the RLPA because training's too hard, I don't think that's something we're going to see from a guy like Jerome Luai.
Tough question, I think, this one, Steve, but what does success look like at the end of Jerome Luai's 5 years at the West Tigers? I know you're one for high standards. Does it mean potentially winning a premiership, or does it mean multiple top 8 finishes or individual accolades for him becoming a top 3 or 4 halfback in the game? What would success look like at the end of his deal?
Well, it's not about what he looks like. That's the first thing. It's all about team first. Now, he has to perform at a high level to contribute to the team, so that happens, but that happens as a byproduct of what you really want to achieve. So the focus is not on him personally, but in 5 years, well, absolutely, it's got to be a premiership. Like I would say 5 years, I do expect us to make the 8 every year, and I'd love to see us win a comp, but I will be realistic and say we're not ready to win a competition yet. But if
get your standards higher, Steve, get your standards higher.
Well, I've got to stop hanging around you then, I reckon. But if he's going to be here for 5 years and we are building, around him, a premiership has got to be a goal within that 5 years.
It was interesting that Jerome was asked the same question yesterday, and I think he said something along the lines of 4 more premierships. Now, I think
awesome.
it was
awesome.
I don't think we're going to get 4 more premierships, but definitely I want to see us pushing for them. I want to see us getting into that top 8. I want to see us then aiming to go a little bit higher. But yeah, I want us contending for premierships.
But that's my whole point, Gary. Like, I know we have a lot of fun mucking around about what our goals are for the team and that sort of thing. But that's my point, right? That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, oh, we're hoping to finish 12th. I want to hear a guy say, no, we're going to win the comp next year, right? Now, that might not be realistic, right? It might not be realistic, but gee, it's nice to hear that you're running around the training paddock there in January in 30-degree heat, and some young bloke sidles up to Jerome Luai and says, how are we going to go this year? He said, we're going to win the comp, mate. We're going to win the comp. Come on, we're going to win the comp. Let's go. That's the attitude you need.
I fully expect our players to be saying that constantly. That's what I expect from the players. From the fan base, I think we need to be a little bit more patient, and probably around the club we need to be a little bit more patient, because the thing is, if you're saying the expectation is to make the 8 next year, what are the consequences if we don't? What are you putting in place if we fail to achieve that expectation next year? Because if there's no consequence for not achieving it, then there's no point having that goal to start with.
Yeah, well, of course there's a consequence, right? Then the consequence is continuing to strengthen the roster. That is the consequence. I don't think if we miss the 8, I don't think the consequence will be to get rid of the coach. I don't think it's long enough for him at that 12 months. But absolutely, if next year's roster cannot make the 8, then there still needs to be changes, and we need to keep strengthening the roster until we do make the 8. But we've got to go into next season with an expectation that those 30 players are good enough to make the top half of the competition.
So when do you think you need to be making those roster changes for 2025?
Well, you have to
be making them now.
Yeah,
because that 12 months.
What I was going to say is that never ends, does it? It's continual. So
that's right.
It's happening now. It'll happen after 5 rounds into the comp next year. It'll happen in June. It'll happen in September. And that is, as you mentioned earlier, some of the difficulties of this roster acquisition process.
So right now we need to be strengthening that 2025 roster. That 2025 roster, even with Jerome coming across, isn't yet strong enough. It's not strong enough to be a guaranteed top 8 squad at this point in time. That's why I'm talking about expectations being a process, because I can look at our squad, and our squad realistically for 2024 isn't a top 8 squad. So we need to be making those decisions now, because you can't wait to the end of 2024 and see how you've gone. You have to be realistic about your expectations now, because that's how you build a club when you have a 12-month kind of waiting period when you're waiting on players you've signed.
Yeah, I
feel
don't
like
think.
I'm,
Sorry,
Sorry, Steve. I was just going to say, I feel like I'm watching Djokovic against Federer. It's just my head's going left to right. Neither of you giving an inch. I mean, are you more the Djokovic type, bit outgoing, or more Federer, a bit more classy and laid back?
Yeah, I'm definitely Federer. I'm liked.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Oh God, help us. Look, I don't think. Look, I don't think. I think to say we're going to win the competition, no, but I don't think you can say we can't make the top 8. It's 50% of the competition. That roster can make the top 8. It can do it. It's absolutely. You're 100% correct. We need to keep strengthening, but that roster.
Look, just stop there, Steve. You said I'm 100% correct.
Can make the
Top
Shane
Richardson, boys. Shane Richardson did another interview with SEN. I believe he was talking to Jimmy Smith. A couple of the things that he said were interesting, Gary, that, he wasn't so concerned about all this talk about Luai's never really run a team. And when you think about it, he made a good point. He said a lot of halves these days split left and right. And whilst you do have a dominant playmaker, they still command those sides of the field. So does that make it, I suppose, less of a hurdle coming across here? The fact that, not that he can't do it, just the fact in Penrith's system he hasn't needed to do it.
Yeah, I think anyone playing next to Nathan Cleary, who, in my opinion, is the best player in the game at the moment, you have a look at his performance. Well, despite being very poor for 60 minutes in that grand final, when it counted, that was one of the best grand final performances I've seen in that last 20 minutes. And when you're playing next to him, you don't need to be as involved. And I really think for the past couple of years, Jerome's been playing a little bit of a team role, doing what is best for the team, not taking as many touches. Apparently, his stats over the last 3 years, his touches during games has continually dropped through as the seasons have gone on. So I think that's just him playing his part in the team. And I'm quite confident once he comes to our side, where he is going to be that guy we're looking to. He is going to be that guy we want calling the shots. He is going to be the most dangerous player on the field for us. I think that takes him to another level, and he's just going to have his hands on the ball more. I think he needs to improve his kicking game a little bit, but I don't have too many concerns about him being that dominant playmaker for us. And what he does do, the biggest concern I had about us last year was our inability to open up sides once we're inside the 20. Our forward pack got us into great field position for the majority of that season until they kind of fell away at the end. I think Jerome Luai fixes that instantaneously. We're going to be much more dangerous in that attacking 20, and he's going to make those centers and second rollers playing outside him much more dangerous. Those guys who were playing outside him, I bet they can't wait to get him across the club and be running off a guy like Jerome.
Jimmy Smith, Steve, he tried to drag Shane Richardson into what you and Gary just did, which was a head-to-head 15 minutes for whether this side could make the 8. And Shane Richardson said, I can't answer those questions, but he said, what I want to do is look at the staff and look at the roster and put the little things in place that matter. He said, put quality people doing quality jobs. I'm sure this would resonate with you, these words.
Yeah, one of the other things I heard him say was his job was not to win football games. His job was to create the environment to allow the coaching staff and players to do the very best they could do. And you couldn't ask for greater support than that. So, Richardson is just saying absolutely everything that you want to hear from him. And you'd expect to hear from a guy who's as experienced and successful as he's been.
Well, I found it quite interesting when he said that we have a lot of hardworking staff that haven't been kind of directed in the right way. I thought that was a very telling comment. And from someone who's now had quite a good look under the hood of our club, it's probably fairly damning on the past administration.
Found what he did say, Stephen. I didn't quite know how to interpret it, but you might be able to help me. You might not. But he sort of said that the corporate side of things, we need a complete change of attitude. And I was wondering whether he thinks we need to do more or whether we need to be more brash about it. He mentioned previously that he thinks Luai is going to be the face of our team, and this will be a massive coup for the marketing. But I thought that was maybe a little shot at the previous administration. I'm not sure what sort of aspect of it, but he said corporately we need a complete change of attitude.
Yeah, so does he? I haven't heard that interview, mate. Was he talking about corporate governance or was he talking about marketing?
I think he was talking more about the marketing side of things, Gary.
He spoke a lot about the marketing, that there needs to be a lot of change in the marketing, which is quite interesting because both his sons work in that field in the NRL as well.
I think it's interesting too because one of the things that we were continually told was going well in the club, and we've got no reason not to believe it, was like there was always the sponsorships were full and there were people lining up for sponsorships, and it seems that was going well, and there's lots of money coming in. I wonder if it's around communication, because the communication out there has been fairly poor. Communicating a solidified message hasn't been great. So I wonder if he was talking about that, but I'm not sure, mate.
I think where we've done really poorly in the past is selling a vision of our club, selling a way forward. The best we've got is token sayings like we're a development club, with not a lot added to that. Now, if you have a look at Richo's time at South Sydney, I don't think there's been a better club at selling themselves and selling a direction to their fans, and that's what we're doing really poorly. So I expect to see that change really well. He spoke in his Baruda pod article where he spoke about how well South Sydney and Russell Crowe especially manages the IP of South Sydney. And I think that's something that they will be having a look at as well. How well we sell that IP and how we link that to the identity of our club moving forward. I think they're areas we're going to see massive change moving forward.
Just cut more on Richardson, boys, and we will come back for a quick part two. It'll be no longer than, say, 10 minutes. I've got a buy, sell, and hold I want to finish with. But sticking with Richardson, he did mention about, I've just lost my papers here, Gary, to stick with me. He mentioned about the halves, and he said he was surprised he said the squad looks a little bit unbalanced. Now, again, he didn't say which areas, and that would probably be competitive advantage. So it's good that he didn't say which areas, but where do you think he meant where he said the squad looks unbalanced?
We do have quite a few players in the halves side up long term, which for me is probably a positive change to what we've seen in the past. I think we've been rabbiting on this pod for the last 2 years about the need to get that half situation sorted out. I think that's going to be part of this year. We've got 3 halves, high quality halves signed up for this year. Aiden Caesar's only here for 1 year with a 1 year extension, but we've got Fainu, we've got Sullivan, and we've got young Galvin coming through, and there's a couple others below that as well. So it could be that weight in the halves. I also still think we're very light in the backs. He spoke about some new signings, possibly in the next 7 days. I think you'll see the back strengthened in the next 7 days because there's some massive holes in our back line. And personally, I think the most unbalanced part of our squad is just missing that really aggressive middle forward. We really need to fix that up. But I expect he's more talking about those outside backs, and I think we'll see something change in that area in the next 7 days.
Don't want to put too much expectation on kids that haven't played a first grade game, Steve, but Richardson, he wasn't afraid. He said Galvin's going to be a superstar and Latu's going to be a superstar. So whether he just let that slip, but I mean, to think that we had, 6 months ago, we had Brooks and Wakeham in the halves and no one else. And now we've signed, Jerome Luai for 5 years. We've got Jaden Sullivan. We've got these 2 young kids who seem like, half the clubs in the competition are going to be after him in the next couple of years. Our club's almost the envy in terms of halves depth, I'd say, going into the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, I said that on the chat the other day. I wrote, if one of these blokes takes off this year or 2 take off this year and become first grade competent, or even better, then all of a sudden you go into 25 and we've got a spine that is, it's really strong. If Buller continues to develop, which there's no reason he won't, we've got Coruscant, obviously, and all of a sudden we have Luai at halfback, and then let's say it's Fainu, or let's say it's Galvin, whoever, but in the six, if we get a bit of luck this year and one of these guys really goes, then that is a really strong spine. So, yeah, it's very promising.
He did mention, Gary, quite bullish, I suppose. He said we're in a position to have potentially one of the strongest spines in the competition. Obviously, so many question marks in terms of can Jerome be a halfback and will these young kids develop? But I sort of keep an eye out on articles and kids coming through at other clubs, and these two, in Latu and Galvin, seem to be two of the more hyped ones around the game.
Yeah, they've both had massive raps on them for the last couple of years, as they're in the same age group as the best two players in their age group. So it's going, and for most of the time, they've both played in the halves. I think Galvin's probably going to have to move away from the halves, but I think we can find room to fit both those guys in, and with one of them playing in the halves outside Jerome Luai, I think that's going to be a really strong spine. And when you talk about experience, I don't think you'd be able to find a spine that's more experienced premiership wise, other than Penrith, than the West Tigers spine they're heading into for 2025. When you have Jerome Luai, who's coming off 3 premierships, you've got Api Coruscant there, who he's won 2 premierships. That's just a really strong experience in that spine, and I don't think many other clubs could match that.
I think Api might have won 3 if you include the South one, part of his career.
So it is 3.
3 and 3. So an oldie but a goodie, a bit like the one word we usually start with in tonight. But we've got buy, sell, and hold. Boys, it's 10 questions. I'm only going to allow you to hold once. I know I can't remember who the culprit was, Gary, whether it was Declan or yourself or
Declan.
Joel.
No, I don't hold. Declan will hold every single question if you give him a chance.
Boys, 8 of the 10 questions are West Tigers related, and there are 2 little curveballs in there. But let's start with this one, Steve. David Norfoluma will play 3 or more first grade games this season. Buy, sell, or hold?
I'm going to sell it, just like I'd like the club to sell him.
That's simple, but I like it, Steve. Gary?
Yeah, I'm selling that. I'm selling that on the street to anyone who'll take it. I don't think he's a chance to play a game.
Question 2, Steve. The club will regret losing Sean Bloor, whether it be this year or next.
I'm buying that, absolutely. Sean Bloor, I know it might not be popular opinion, but I think Sean Bloor, I've seen enough of Sean Bloor to think he's a great player, can be a great player. So we will regret that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the club will regret losing him. Whether they should have put more effort into keeping him, I don't know. It's at the point now where if we were to let him go, I'm not greatly concerned, only because he's only here for another 12 months. We've lost him now, and whether that's this year or next, I don't think makes a huge difference.
Question 3, I'll start with you, Gary. I'll expand this one a little bit, but it's essentially the same question. The club will regret doing business with Melbourne and buying Justin Olam.
What we've seen from the club over the past month, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this deal. I'm going to give Benji the benefit of the doubt on this deal.
You've got your doubts, though, don't you?
But there is an awful lot of doubt there. He's 30 now. He turned 30 in December. His performances weren't great last year. I know he's injured, but you don't suddenly start getting injured less as you enter your 30s. This is a really concerning signing for me, and I would jump at the chance of signing him for 1 year. I think it would be a great signing, possibly even 2, but 3 years is just too long. So I'm buying it. As my personal opinion, but I'll give the club the benefit of the doubt on it just because of how good the last month and a bit have been.
Steve, like Gary said, I don't want to be sort of negative tonight, but like in 3 years' time, like can you see this trade if it does happen, which it looks like it's back on? Anyone coming out and saying, well, West Tigers were the winners of that trade against Melbourne, getting Justin Olam compared to Sean Bloor. I just can't visualise it at the moment.
No, I can't. But it just seems that these days they do whatever they have to do to get a deal across the line. They probably want him for 1 year. They're going to have to take him for 3, and then they're going to sell him off at the end of the 1 year, and pay whatever they got to pay to get out of the contract. Like that's just seems to be the way it gets done these days, which I think is crazy. But I'm not doing the business. I'd love to see him, mate. He's one of the favourite players I enjoy watching over the last few years, but not the guy
Struggled last year.
Yeah, not the guy we saw last season. That's right.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, Steve. I really hope I'm wrong about it, because for the past 3 or 4 years, he's been one of my favourite players in the comp. I really like him as a centre. I think I've said on the pod a number of times, I like how he plays. His ability to, because of his damaging running style as a centre, there's not many centres now who can create opportunities for themselves. And he's able to do that with that powerful and quite courageous running style that he has. And he at his prime would be a great signing for the club. But I am very worried that he is past his prime. But I will say the one thing he probably does have going for him, he may be 30, but he hasn't played a lot of football. He apparently his parents made him go to uni and get his degree before they'd let him play football. So he hasn't played quite as much football as most 30-year-olds have. I think he's only been in the NRL for about 5 years as well. So that is the one little benefit that he may have in regards to his age.
Just play a tiny bit of devil's advocate to that. You're right, he hasn't played a lot of football, but gee, he plays hard football.
He plays very hard football.
Yeah.
I think that's watching him last year, Gary. It's just the physicality was sort of still there, but laterally in defence, it didn't look like he had it. That was against high level opposition, but just worries me when Melbourne don't exactly have big name centres, and he wasn't getting a look in ahead of them.
No, and there's reports that something happened down at Melbourne that kind of got him offside with the club down there. I don't know how true any of that is. I don't know what actually happened. They say it wasn't anything major. But signing a 30-year-old centre who has played a very hard style of football does worry me for 3 years.
Question 4, Steve. Junior Tupou, who has signed with the Dolphins from 2025, should be the first winger picked for the West Tigers in 2024. Buy, sell, or hold?
I'll buy that if his form dictates that. If his preseason form is that he's the number 1 pick, then pick him. What's happening in 25 should have no bearing on 24 if his attitude's good.
Especially the depth we have with our wingers, Gary.
Yeah, I probably have Staines just in front of him. I quite like Staines. I think he can do a really good job on the wing, but he's far and away light years ahead of David Nofaluma in a spot. So he's going to be in the side. I think he's going to be a bit of a loss as well. I think he's just about ready to make a jump into a really strong player.
Question 5, Gary. Latu Fainu will play 10 or more first grade games in 2024. Buy, sell, or hold?
I'm going to buy it, more so on hope. I'd love to see him play that many games. A year in reserve grade probably wouldn't hurt him too much, but I want to see us start progressing, and really for this side to start progressing and moving forward, we need some of these young guys to make a jump and kind of go to that next level really quickly. So I'm going to buy it with a little bit of hope on that buy.
Steve, this might be a bit of an unfair one, given you probably haven't seen him play like I have. He's only a kid, but Lachlan Galvin will make his debut in 2024 in first grade.
Can I ask a question? How old is he?
I don't know.
I think he's 18.
Questions. Is he in the top 30 this year, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say he will. And I'm only going off the Rapster here about him. and it'll probably be towards the back end of the year.
I think the way that Shane Richardson's been talking about him, it kind of reminds me how Tim Sheens was talking about Buller over the last off season. No one really saw Buller making the jump that he made this year, and this time last year, Tim Sheens was talking about him a lot, and the way Shane Richardson has kind of mentioned him in every press conference so far, I expect to see. I think he probably will get a run at some point. What will be interesting is what position he actually gets a run in.
Changing tack, boys, for these next two. Steve, Penrith will win a fourth comp in a row in 2024. Buy, sell, or hold.
I'm going to sell it. I'm going to say it's just a bridge too far. I think they've done exceptionally well to do 3 in this modern era. I don't think they can do 4. Please don't ask me who's going to win, because I'm not sure I can answer that.
I hate Penrith. I really, really, really hate Penrith. But I'm going to buy it. I think they're still a very strong side. Losing Crichton's going to hurt them a lot. I don't think they actually realise how much that's going to hurt them. But a little part of me, now that Jerome Luai is going to be a West Tigers player, a little part of me wouldn't mind seeing him get a 4th premiership before he comes over and turns our club around. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that part of it, but the rest of it, everyone else at Penrith, they can go take a long walk off a short pier.
Yeah, I think they'll be in the grand final again, and that gives you a pretty good chance of winning it. Steve, I wanted to ask Declan this one, but he's not on tonight. Michael Maguire, remember he did coach the West Tigers, will be a success as New South Wales Origin coach.
Yeah, I'll buy that. I think his style is really suited to State of Origin football. It needs to be hard, aggressive football, and that's Michael Maguire. He is short term with the players because I think he would get under the modern player's skin a fair bit. I think he did at West Tigers. In that shorter period of time, that's less likely to happen. I think he's been found wanting with his adapting his style of footy to the modern game, but I think his style of footy will work well in State of Origin, and I think he's shown he can only really coach that one sort of way. That might be selling him a bit short, but I think that style will work well in State of Origin. So, yeah.
No success, Gary. That was your answer.
No. I agree. I don't think Steve was being harsh. I don't think he can really adapt his style of coaching. I tend to agree with what Steve said. I think he's a very good rep coach. I think what he's done at New Zealand, he's been quite impressive there. Their performance end of last year, I think, was fantastic. What they did to Australia. So moving into another rep role, I think was the best step for him. For most of the reasons Steve said, I think Steve pretty much nailed that. The players not having that opportunity to get tired of his style, I think will be of benefit. And he needs a pack that can really play through the middle. And when you're at a representative level, getting those sort of players is a lot easier than convincing them to come and play at the West Tigers. So I think that's going to be a lot easier. He doesn't have to sign players; he can just pick players. And I think we'll see a vastly improved New South Wales squad next year. I think he's a much better coach than Brad Fittler, and I which I don't think is very difficult, but I think that he's a major step up from Brad Fittler as New South Wales coach.
Gary, this one for you. Jaden Sullivan will be the odd man out at the end of 2024. Just before you answer it, would he be thinking at the moment, this is all a bit weird? I've signed a 4-year deal with the West Tigers, and now they're talking up 2 kids who haven't played a game, and now they've gone and signed Luai for 5 years. Would he be thinking a little bit, like he'd be scratching his head a bit, wouldn't he?
Probably. He spoke fairly well. I think when he first came across the club, he was asked a question about Jerome Luai coming to the club, and he answered it fairly well that he would want to be the player that plays next to him. Now, the concern I have with Jaden Sullivan, I think he has a lot of potential to be a really strong footballer, really strong attacking player. I think he improves our attack in that 20-metre zone vastly on what it was last year. I don't think he makes the difference that Jerome Luai makes, but I think he opens up that attack really well. My big concern with him is he was playing at the Dragons last year. We also saw where the Dragons finished, and he couldn't cement a starting spot in that side. So I think he has a lot of potential, but he's still yet to fully prove himself as an NRL player. And that's why I was really pleased with our pursuit of Luai, because I think we're much better to bank on a guy who's won 3 premierships than a guy who hasn't quite proven that he's an NRL first grader yet. And we've been waiting for potential for a long time at this club, and I think we needed someone, especially to guide these young guys coming through who can take on that role. And I don't think Jaden Sullivan's at that level yet. And yeah, I think he probably will be the one that misses out. But the good part is halves are hard to come by, and I'm sure someone will come knocking if he's not getting a huge go at the Tigers.
Steve, I don't think you'll like the way the question is framed, but I know your answer for this one. The West Tigers will finish outside of the bottom 4 in 2024.
Finish outside of the bottom 4. Yeah, I'll buy that. They'll make the top 8.
There you go. That was going to be my question, but I wanted to give Gary an out, because I knew if I said West Tigers going to make the top 8, Gary would sort of say, yeah, maybe. I'm going to.
Yeah, that might have been the one I held, Eddie.
Might have been the one.
But yeah, I'll buy that. We'll be outside the bottom 4. Just
okay. Anyway, thank you, boys. We've obviously 2024 won't be long now before they'll be playing trials. We'll look up and we'll be playing trials. I can't remember where the trials are this year. I don't think there might be one at Belmore. I don't think there's one at Leichhardt or Campbelltown, but we'll definitely be having hopefully 1 or 2 podcasts before our first trial, and hopefully we might find Joel before then, Gary.
Yeah, hopefully he's back for these new signings we've apparently got coming next week. You can have a little bit of a break, and we'll get the number 2 host back on.
All right. Thank you, boys. See you next time.
Please.